All right, ladies and gentlemen, I got a special guest, a former Blackshirt, former teammate of mine. He was the first true freshman to start at Nebraska when he started as a true freshman. Since 1997, I believe he started 2000. I could be wrong. He can correct me on that. But this is a man who played multiple years as a Blackshirt, one of my former teammates. All right, this is a guy, let me get this here and get this accurate. Honorable mention, all Big 12, the coaches, the AP, in 2002, first team academic all Big 12 as well. Mr. Philip Bland, how you doing, my friend? Philip, are you there?
I am. Man, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I appreciate you joining me. So you're from Colorado, grew up in Boulder. Obviously, Nebraska had a big win over Colorado this year. But I want to go back a little bit before we get to present day and even project forward just a little bit. Coming out of high school, all right, you lived 1 mile from Colorado head coach Gary Barnett, yet he was the last coach to visit you and they were the last college to offer you. What was that like for you, and how did that affect your decision-making process when you were trying to figure out where you wanted to play college ball at?
Man, that's a good question. As you can imagine, especially living back here just outside of Boulder now, I get asked that quite a bit, man. God, there's a lot that goes into that. My dad played football for CU in the early 70s and had season tickets. Used to go to all the home games. We grew up not just CU fans, but there was a pretty serious distaste for Nebraska, and it was kind of funny, man. If you'd have asked me freshman year, sophomore year in high school, I'd be like, oh my goodness, like CU, there's no other school I'd want to go to other than that. And yeah, just the way the chips fell. And especially with Frank Solich and Ron Brown were the two that recruited me. I knew, even though the family history and the CU Nebraska rivalry, Nebraska they're incredible, man. And the way that I was recruited by Frank and Coach Brown specifically, plus the fact that they were the first school to offer me a scholarship, which really meant a lot to me. It ended up being a pretty easy decision for me. I think they were ranked number 2 in the country at the time. Just ran off 3 national championships in 4 years. I know it was much more difficult for my dad. And that's, looking back, I think I still have, a tender heart for him. Knowing that he drove out from my true freshman year on to every single home game in Lincoln and never wore one thing that said Nebraska on it, which I actually really respect. But it just goes to show what it was like growing up in Boulder and playing for, the famous, iconic CU coach Bill McCartney's son, Tom, who's still the head coach at Fairview. It was an interesting time, man. But I certainly was proud of the decision that I made. I have zero regrets whatsoever on that. And what's interesting too is my dad came around. I wouldn't say that he's pulling for Nebraska maybe the way that he does for CU, but he does pull for them. And for me, it worked out the way that it was supposed to, man.
So, dare I say, you heard a lot of anti-Nebraska Cornhusker football rhetoric growing up, but you overcame it. You came over to the side of the good guys. An interesting tidbit, Philip and I chatted for the first time in years right before I came on air today, and we discovered that Tom McCartney, his high school football coach, his brother actually almost became my NFL agent when I was leaving Nebraska. So it's kind of a small world out there. But talk to me about getting the win over Colorado this year, what that specific, and I know Husker fans kind of at this point don't want to hear that, but for those, like someone like yourself who's in Colorado, from Colorado, grew up a CU fan, okay, played here, what does getting that win for someone like yourself mean, and getting that win over CU this year?
I'm happy you mentioned that, because as you know, it's been pretty tough sledding over the years, and especially as it relates to the way that some of the most of the recent games against CU have gone down, just heartbreak left and right. And, it's not just me too. I do want to point out there were, Corey Ross and Gary Pike, both from Colorado, were in my scholarship class back in 01. Ross Pilkington from Colorado, Josh Davis, and a whole bunch of others. And I was catching up with Dennis LeBlanc in the athletic department, who I hadn't spoken with in a while. And right after the CU game, and I told him, I was like, that is the biggest win since I've cared more about that game and that win than any game since I played. And especially the way we showed up in the first half, it was really special, man. And it was nice to be there with some of my CU fan buddies that, as you can imagine, been giving me all the noise over the last however many years it's been since we've won. But it was cool being there with my fiance Samantha. She's rocking my Rose Bowl jersey, and there were a lot of sad faces with the group that I was with watching, and that definitely was not me or my fiance, and had a couple other teammates and buddies there. But it was, I can only say that that win meant more to me personally than any other game that since I was done playing.
A lot of sad faces on the faces of Colorado fans means a lot of smiles on the faces of Nebraska and Husker fans. Now, you mentioned to me also before we came on air that you played in that Rose Bowl versus Miami. You actually played in that game, I think you mentioned, on a broken ankle. And so you re-hurt or hurt your other ankle. You go ahead and clear it up when I'm done asking the question. Versus Southern Miss just a year or two later, and you weren't actually able to finish out your career at Nebraska after having been a black shirt for a couple of seasons. So what exactly happened there, and what was it like for you having to go through that?
Yeah, man. There's a lot in that question as well. I ended up first time I broke my ankle was we were playing at Kansas, and it was kind of a normal play. Overran the ball carrier a little bit, and when I tackled him, my foot, which normally would slide in the grass or in the Astro grass, it just didn't. So I had my body plus the weight of the running back, falling down, and I remember the doctor saying, God, it's strange that your tendons or your ligaments didn't rupture, and it actually just pulled bones, the connecting bones off the back of my ankle. And but they're like, hey, we still have some time. Our team obviously is undefeated at that point. Can't damage it anymore. So I can tell you that we exhausted, I would imagine, every possible treatment to get me ready. But I ended up had some custom ankle brace made for that game specifically for against what is an NFL Hall of Fame team in that Miami team. But yeah, I played in that game on a broken ankle. I played maybe 10 or 15 snaps. Had surgery afterwards, and then ended up on kind of a nothing out of the ordinary play, just against Southern Miss, broke up a pass, and something with either the way that the tight end stepped on my foot or what. I knew it felt like so I could instantly tell there was a problem to my ankle, and I ended up having my second surgery, the same ankle, same scar actually, which is kind of wild, but flew to Seattle to have the surgery done by the Seahawks and Mariners orthopedic surgeon, and to say it was never the same. I mean, it was never the same after the first injury, and then after the second, it was destined that there were other plans for me other than playing football.
So basically, about midway or early on in your junior year, unfortunately, it was kind of the end of everything. And I can relate to a certain degree with my knee and how things ended in the NFL for me. So What was that process like after that? Obviously, whole new staff comes in, new coach, you started as a true freshman. Colorado didn't, thought of you last minute, yet you come here to a better program and team at the time, and you start as a true freshman.
Yep.
You put your heart and soul into it. Then here comes a new staff with Callahan, a new DB's coach. What was that whole process like as well for you?
Surreal, I think, would be a good way to answer that. I can just tell you how it went down, and when the decision, not just about, God, do I try to rehab? It looked like I almost certainly would need that third ankle surgery. Do I want to go through that again? Can I even be of, value to anyone on a football field? So I have those thoughts going through my mind, and then also have what was really just a sad situation with the way Frank was fired, especially the year prior. Had to let a lot of guys that he has known and coached with for a long time go to bring in Bo Pelini and the rest of that staff on the defensive side. But going back to that moment. So first time meeting Coach Callahan, obviously have all the emotions and sadness of what happened with Frank, and then with Bo getting overlooked or not chosen for that job. And I think Coach Callahan was calling in all the returning starters and seniors, and I stepped into his office, and he's like, "Hey, Phil, sit down." He's like, "How's the ankle?" I was like, "Man, honestly, not very good." And he's like, been watching some film, and he goes, I'm sitting across the table from one of the top safeties in the country, which I thought was an interesting thing to say. I was like, "Well, have you watched the film of me like limping into your office?"
Yeah.
But I thought that was funny. But he's like, have you ever thought about, or would you consider an experimental ankle replacement? And I remember that floored me. I was like, whoa. I mean, this is over 20 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it was definitely at that point where I was like, no, that's definitely not the path that I'm going. And I remember I was leaving his office and going right to Coach Almation. Our DBs were about to meet. Again, I don't really know him either. I was like, "Hey, Coach, do you mind if I say something?" Or I'd like to address the secondary and let them know, for me personally, my decision. And the strange part about that, he's like, "Oh yeah, that's great. You can do that." And so we go into the meeting, and right away, I don't know if he forgot or just was planning on a different time or what, but I ended up having to kind of raise my hand and stand up and let many of these guys who I've been with for 3 years, let them know that that I'm not able to play, and wish them the best. And that was a really tough moment, man. I mean, all the way around, and just the reality of injuries being something that obviously you can't prepare for. It's part of the game. It's just you don't, as a kid or high school, especially in college, you just always hope that you could go out on your own terms and not because your body didn't cooperate. So yeah, it was wild going from a really regimented, I spent a lot of time in the training room rehabbing ankle surgeries and a shoulder reconstruction my sophomore year, to then just being like a student. It was wild, man, and something that I missed. Yeah, I know when we were catching up, that missing the camaraderie, and even if I was in a boot, like I feel like I spent half my career in a boot, but just being there with the guys and being part of that, going from that just being your everyday life to now all of a sudden you go to class and graduate and move on with your life was a pretty wild experience, man.
Yeah, it can definitely be challenging. It was actually good to catch up with you today before air. Now we're on air. It's a good thing for people, I think, to hear from people like you. Like even Jake was like, "Man, what happened Philip's last, 2 years there. And I didn't know until I'd asked you. I kind of asked you. So I appreciate you being willing to open up, share your story. Sometimes that can be easier. Sometimes that can be harder. But I got one last question for you, and I appreciate your time. Do you have any, and you can go any direction you want with this. It can be funny. You can be serious, whatever. Do you have any behind-the-scenes stories you'd like to share with the fine folks at home from your time here in Lincoln?
Oh, man. Yeah, I have a few. So I would be remiss to not bring up the one time. You'll have to correct me on what the year, if that was your redshirt year or in 03. But I obviously heard about you coming in. Hey, we have this awesome DN or D-line recruit. Oh, and he also was like a higher recruited or more sought after quarterback in high school. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. Then I remember seeing you and I was like, dude, and this guy looks like he can bench 1,000 pounds and is just this monster of a dude. And I'm like, so it's that guy? I'm like, that's wild. And I can't remember if there was a quarterback competition or what it was. I don't know how a football ended up in your hands, but it was either a challenge or a dare. Someone was like, hey, Carriker can throw it like 70 yards. And I remember not just me, but everyone being like, oh, okay, like, let's see this. And sure enough, you're in a boot. You don't even like crow hop, no, like nothing. And just throw this tight spiral at least 70 yards. I like to tell it like more like 75 or 80. And I remember that just being like completely blown away that I just saw what I saw. So yeah, that's one of those memories, especially when I think of you, that is the first that comes to mind. And then, a few others, like I played with just some insane athletes. Mm-hmm. And Keo Craver, who he was gone before you got there, but he was a phenomenal corner. I remember one day I just look over. We're just in helmets and no pads on, and I look over and there's some dude doing back handspring over and over and over and over again, and then a full complete like layout backflip. Like you'd see from like an Olympic gymnast or something. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, it was Keo. I remember looking at that. I'm like, dude, that's a different kind of level of athleticism. Yeah, I could go on with more stories like that, but I would say those are two definitely of the most that stick out.
Oh man, I appreciate your time. Yeah, we just had Keo on either a week or two. He had some great insights on the secondary. Yeah. I appreciate you coming on. For the story about me throwing, Joe Daly was talking trash. That's how that started. He did not end up on top of that competition. And
he did not, man.
Just because it's made me mad. I could never reach 85 yards. It was 84. That's how I know it was specifically 84, because I can never reach 85. Anyways, I appreciate you taking the time to join me. And dude, let's keep in contact.
I'm looking forward to it, man. Thanks again for having me on.